Okay, well, let's get started. If you just joined, my name is Megan Janicki. I'm the Libraries Build Business Project Manager with Public Policy and Advocacy Office at ALA. This is the Libraries Build Business April Community Discussion. Our topic this month is Small and Rural Libraries Build Business, and will be led today by Susan Preece from the Topsom Public Library in Maine and Brandon West from the Independence Public Library in Kansas. So I think I'll turn it over to Susan first. Is that right?
Sure. Thank you very much. Libraries Build Business has been a really exciting program to be a part of. Brandon and I were sort of in the first cohort, and we found out pretty quickly that we were the teeny tiniest of the libraries. And so it was interesting to hear what happened in other libraries, in the larger libraries, but it also it was really good for Brandon and I to keep talking to each other about what was happening in our area, because small libraries have different issues, as you well know. Megan, did you want to put up my slides? That'd be great. Or do you want me to?
I've got them, just a second.
Okay, so we're the Topsom Public Library. I'm in Midcoast, Maine, which is about 35 minutes north of Portland, Maine. And we have a community of about 9,000. We are near Bowdoin College, which is in Brunswick, the next town over. And we are one of 62 consortial libraries with the Minerva Consortium. And it's libraries of all sizes that are in the Minerva Consortium. So we think of ourselves as here we are, Topsom Public Library in Maine. We are a connecting organization. That's pretty much what we do here. Our mission is to connect resources, programs, and services to the community to stimulate personal growth and enrichment. And our vision for this community is that the Topsom Public Library is the access point for traditional and innovative resources to meet informational, social, and cultural needs of an evolving community. So we had a Naval Air Station base in Brunswick, which is, again, right over the bridge close to us. And it was decommissioned, it was bracked when I first got here. And so huge numbers of people became unemployed in like 2007, 2008, had to be move out, so that there was this huge drain of people from the area. And at that point in time, I reached out to the career centers, and the career centers are a statewide organization of basically workforce development and workforce support. And initially, I was working with them and said, we have to reach out to these people here in this area, and how can we do that? So starting in 2007, I had been having conversations with periodic frequency with the career centers and another company called New Ventures Maine. So what we've been trying to do ever since is to sort of keep communications going. And our original plan is to assist the newly unemployed in rebuilding their careers and expanding their entrepreneurial skills. And that took many different forms. It first started as a job information center, which was like a shelf and books. That was what we had there. Oh yeah, we are bigger. There's a note in the chat that Marianne's community is much smaller. So, somebody there, cool. I got to stop looking at the chat. So what we did is we started to reach out to these other local organizations for help as we saw changes in the community and changes in the economic downturn. So we had been sort of dabbling in and out. We would have a periodic program. We would upgrade our books and send out a flyer and email to our groups and say, hey, we have new stuff here, come in and check out the library. But really it wasn't until Libraries Build Business grant came along that we thought, hey, we could really be that conduit. We think of ourselves as a connecting organization. And the concern that we always had as a small library was we don't know everything. And so because we didn't know everything, we were afraid to jump in. So with the support of the Libraries Build Business, we can move to the next slide. We decided that the easiest way for us to connect would be to provide tailored services to our communities, support knowledgeable staff, and making sure that our staff knew as much about workforce development in this area and the local organizations that were available. And then we had this great idea. We thought, well, we could maybe offer a little financial assistance because some of the groups that we were working with had a little bit of money, not a lot of money, but a little bit of money. So our plan was to connect job seekers and students in the schools, and also here at the library. We have a community room, which is got about seating for about 100, 150. We wanted to connect our patrons with the local organizations that can help them. The Chamber of Commerce in Topsom and Brunswick area has been very supportive of the local not-for-profits. And so they were one of our first calls. The career centers, as I mentioned, I had already sort of had this little connection with them, but then we delved into it a little bit deeper. And we had the career centers people come to the library and do one-on-one meetings with clients here in the building. And it was sort of a drop-in session that the career center people told us, gave us a whole bunch of resources ourselves that we could use, and then was working with our patrons as a drop-in. And then we were just starting to talk about local grants and government support and maybe some credit unions to get some small and micro loans. And we had a pandemic. So that was not so great. So on the next slide, we tried to figure out, how to get around these issues. So our challenges were that we had a limited local job market because so many businesses had closed or were completely closed during the pandemic. There were competing priorities of education and other life necessities. When you have a business or when you're out of work, but you also have to take care of your kids and figure out where your next meal is coming from, you're not really amenable, we found, to sitting down, to coming to a program, sitting down and doing all these things. You want somebody to point you in a direction and say, go here, do this, and these people could help you. So that was our general idea of triaging what's going on in this community. We had limited resources, but we do have access to technology here. Broadband is a huge issue in Maine, particularly anything like around any kind of a rural community like ours. You can have great broadband and Wi-Fi access in the town area itself, but you go 5 minutes or 10 minutes out and you can't get service. So that's an issue statewide. And then it's the whole economic downturn and people feeling embarrassed and uncomfortable. So we talked specifically with the Career Center group to try to offer a place in Topsom where people could privately connect through Zoom in our building with our equipment to a career center volunteer, just like they had been doing before, and as in the building. So I'll go to the next slide, please, Megan. What ended up happening was our patrons were very excited about this. We had a very, very fast flurry of about 15 people that in the first month that were connecting regularly with a career counselor and a support group through the career centers. And it got so we thought, well, wow, that's great. We're successful. Now we'll just wait until the pandemic is over, and then we'll go back to doing what our plan was. But all of a sudden, other libraries were connecting with us. The Career Center was calling the local libraries in all the different areas across the state of Maine. Next thing you know, we're running an 8-library program of small local libraries who are basically doing this exact same thing with our model. So we're now, our reach is 8 additional libraries in the space of, I don't know, 6-8 months. So one of the things that has been really helpful to me is to think about the fact that even small steps, like just trying to, fill in the blank here, can create some really exciting partnerships. The logos that you see across the top here are the organizations that we formally partner with, but all those other 8 libraries just sort of jumped on board and said, hey, can we try it and see how it goes? So the original plan that we had didn't work. So because of the pandemic, that was okay. We had to regroup and adjust, and we had to figure out where we were going next. And sometimes it's like serendipity, the serendipity of having an event happen or a connection with someone that moves your program in a different direction. So the things that I've learned, if something doesn't work, it's okay. Regroup and adjust. There also is a life cycle to everything. Sometimes it works really, really well. Like for the first 3 months, it was like really, really busy. It's petering out now. We're reconvening in May to sort of figure out where we go next, and evaluate it. Take a look at it, get some, easy surveys out of Project Outcome or something like that through PLA, and just try is what the bottom line is from my perspective as a small library. So that's me. Maybe Brandon, are you up?
Yeah, I will take over. Thank you, Susan.
Sure.
Awesome that you had 8 other libraries come on
I
board.
know. What is that about?
Thank you all for coming this afternoon and listening to Susan and I talk. And thank you to the American Library Association for the Library Small Business Grant. It's been wonderful getting to work with 12 other libraries across the country. Part of this cohort, I constantly was comparing myself to the other libraries and being like, oh, well, LA is doing this. Why can't we do this here in Independence? And it got really frustrating. So having Susan on board with the cohort was really helpful, because then we could talk to each other and being like, well, they're all doing this, and we're, these small town libraries, how are we doing it? So having some smaller libraries to kind of bounce ideas off and also just to be there for support was a huge help. Here in Independence, we started this process about 4 years ago. And we had the idea of, we wanted to do something for economic development within our community. We did a strategic plan. We got community input, and the number one thing, minus the need for a hospital in our community, was economic development. And so we put that on our strategic plan. We wanted to do something with economic development. We didn't really know what, and it was always on our strategic plan, but we never really got to tackle it. And we started to see an economic development renaissance within our community. When I came into the community 9 years ago, our downtown was nothing but antique stores and boarded up windows. within the last 5 years, we've had this renaissance in our community, and there's hardly a empty storefront on our main street. But the downside to that was that the new business owners coming into our downtowns were primarily white, primarily upper middle class, and on face value lack diversity. So as a library, we wanted to ensure that our underserved populations could have access to the same material, same resources that all these other business owners had. And we also noticed that a lot of our economic development entities in our community, we have about 5 of them, not including the library at the time, they weren't necessarily approachable. They weren't approachable to the younger generation. They weren't approachable to the Black community, to the Hispanic community. So we were noticing people coming into our library asking us for resources. And so when the Libraries Build Business grant opened up, we thought, why not? We need to try it now. This has been on our strategic plan for a long time. Now it's now or never. And we were fortunate enough to get this grant, but we realized that you don't just need a grant. Yes, a grant helps, but it's all about connecting your community to their needs and to the resources that you can provide or that your community has. So we looked at our community needs, and we noticed that patrons needed access to the resources on their time. Most of our community members don't have time to come to a program at 6 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday because they have their kids in sports or this, that, and the other, or they're just plain exhausted. I mean, how many of us go home from work and are completely exhausted and don't want to get back out? So that we needed to make sure that our program or our idea was accessible to our patrons at their own time. We also recognize that we have a very limited sized staff. We're very fortunate enough to have the staff that we do, but we're all, just like you, overworked and don't have time to develop new initiatives all the time or do a lot of the things you need to do to develop a robust program. We also needed it to be flexible for our patrons and flexible for our staff. And we also wanted to make sure that our patrons had access to resources. We're very fortunate in our community to have a place called the Fab Lab, which is like a fabrication lab or a large scale maker space, and they do phenomenal things. But it costs $150 for a year-long membership, which doesn't sound like a lot to some of us, but to some people, that's a lot of money. So we wanted to make sure that our community had access to the same type of resources that the Fab Lab did. There's also economic development classes in our community. Those also cost a large sum of money, and there are some scholarships available, but there's not enough for the amount of people that would like to take it. And then lastly, we wanted to make sure that our patrons had access to technology, to up-to-date computers and software. So when we took all these needs into consideration, we came up with a 2-prong approach, which was to develop a business lab at our library and to develop a self-paced course and program modules. So what we did with our business lab is we took a space in our community or in our library that didn't really get used very much because it's kind of in the back of the library. It had some work tables and that was it. And we designated that as our business lab. And we've got a couple computers designated specifically for that. And thanks to the grant, we were able to get a Mac and a gaming Dell desktop. And so those are our 2 computers for our business lab. But for our books, we just took the business section in our collection, pulled that out of our collection and highlighted it. We haven't really bought a ton of new books for our collection. We used what we already had, pulled that out and highlighted what we had already. But part of our lab, we also wanted to include a makerspace. I mentioned that we have a makerspace in our community, but it's expensive. What we wanted to do was to have pieces in our makerspace in our library that were the same type of machinery at the Fab Lab, so our patrons could get experience and test the waters with some of that equipment. And then eventually, if they say, oh, well, I can really use this laser engraver, but the library, your laser is always used or always busy. Well, if they got their business going at the library, then they can easily get a scholarship into the Fab Lab, and then you have access to even more lasers. So our goal with our makerspace was just to get our patrons' feet wet with the tools. So like I said, in our makerspace, we had a laser engraver. So patrons can engrave wood, they can etch glasses, they can cut things on the laser. We have a 3D printer where they can prototype different parts to various, we had a patron make a lock for a sliding door because their cat was getting in their closet. So they can prototype different things on our small 3D printer. And then, like I said, after they kind of get the gist of the 3D printing down in the CAD programs, then they can take and get a scholarship and go on to the Fab Lab and have access to better quality, larger 3D printers. And then the last piece of equipment that we bought with our for our makerspace was a Cricut. And this allows for a plethora of things to use in your community. And then through other grants, we were able to purchase equipment for a recording studio for local musicians and podcasters. And then we were also able to purchase a large format printer, which allowed us to, or allows the community to print like banners and large scale things up to 42 inches wide by 122 inches long. And this is all just available to our community 2 blocks from our downtown. We also wanted to develop a small conference room within our business lab because we have a fairly large meeting space. But when you have somebody needing to meet with another person one-on-one, our large meeting room is kind of daunting and not very cozy. So we actually are in the process of turning one of our unused restrooms that we had to block off due to vandalism. We're gutting that out and putting a conference center in there that will also be a soundproof recording studio when it's not being reserved for conferences. So that was our lab. Our second part of our program was creating a self-paced program to help entrepreneurs start their small business from the idea all the way through to the growth phase of starting and running a small business. So one thing that we realized during the pandemic is that we weren't going to have face-to-face classes for a good portion of this. So how do we get our program to make sure that it could be self-paced in front of our patrons? And what we decided was to use Beanstack. And many of you might use Beanstack for your summer reading program. It's used to track reading. You can track books, days read, you name it, anything with literacy you could do. You can create your own challenges. Well, we took that program because we had just bought it prior to the pandemic. We were going to use it for 1,000 books before kindergarten. And boy, were we excited we purchased Beanstack when we did, because it became extremely valuable. But also we were able to use it through the activity portion of Beanstack and the activity challenges, create a course with badges and the resources built in for people to come up with an idea for their business, write a business plan, write a marketing plan, and effectively launch their small business. Each badge has a series of activities that they have to create or to complete and submit and get feedback on it. And after they complete each badge, they also meet with a library staff member to give us feedback as well so we can improve our program. We did realize that part of the self-paced course, just from start to finish, was a big commitment. So we're now currently working on breaking that up into chunks. So there might be a course on how to write a business plan or how to write a marketing plan. We're also developing another course on how to sell your handmade crafts online, because a lot of makers in our community, when they hear Etsy or some of the other type of online selling agencies, they're like, I don't know how to do it. So we want to be able to give them the resources to get their information or get their products online and reach a larger audience. We're also going to be working on developing a Google Ads course to where a lot of our small businesses here in our communities are really interested in the Google Ads and want to know how to use those. So we're going to be working on a Beanstack course for Google Ads. And then a lot of people kind of overlook this section of business development, but nonprofits, we've had a lot of success working with our local nonprofit or individuals wanting to start nonprofits. Part of our databases selection for our business center includes the Foundation Center, which is one of the largest grant databases in the country. So we routinely work with nonprofits and individuals working towards starting a nonprofit on finding grant funding and how to write grants. And we utilize the Foundation Center's database for that as well. We also got 4 other databases through EBSCO for our program, which include the Hobbies and Crafts Reference Center, Entrepreneurial Study Source, and Small Business Reference Center. And then working with our partners at the Fab Lab, every semester they do an entrepreneurial mindset course using the Ice House materials. And EBSCO has a really great database or class called the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program that uses the Ice House materials, just like the Fab Lab class does. And we were working with them to use the database to lower the cost to next to nothing for people to be able to participate in it. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. A lot of the takeaways that we got from our time building our program was that if you build it, they don't always come. You know, things have changed so much in the last 2 years that our prior methods of marketing our programs and events didn't work during the pandemic. And even though we had this like really great resource in our community that's free to use, people weren't coming and they didn't know about it. And that's because our main mode of communication in our community was word of mouth. I think a lot of you can attest to that. In small communities, word of mouth is probably the biggest form of marketing or communication a library has. And we didn't have that during the pandemic. So it was really hard to get people to come in and use our services. See, we also had somehow along the way during our building of our program, we somehow shifted our focus from the entrepreneurs, the people starting their businesses in their home, people making crafts, doing hair at home. We shifted our focus somehow from that towards focusing on our already established small businesses. And it kind of got us off track on our target audience. So making sure that you keep your target audience at the forefront of your mind. I think a lot of the issues we had was we were wanting the approval of the small business community, the already established small business community. So we started to plan programs that catered to them and left the ones that we actually needed to help. So making sure that you keep your target audience on focus is a big takeaway that we got. And another one is partners that you've always worked with. Don't necessarily assume that they're always going to be partners with you through every initiative. We ran into some issues with some of our economic development entities in our community, basically telling us to stay in our lanes. And libraries don't really have a lane. We work on all facets of the community, and our main goal is to connect our patrons with the resources that they need and want. And so while we lost some partners, we are still able to refer our patrons to those entities because we know that they're a good source of information. So even if you have hiccups with partnerships, continue to persevere because what you're doing is important to your patrons. And then another takeaway is knowing what your community is saying and needs. Recently, I unfortunately took a trip down the Reddit rabbit hole and went through a thread and noticed that a lot of people were saying that we're duplicating services. And that's partly in my fault. I wasn't getting the messaging out in our community about what resources we had. So I mentioned that we have the Fab Lab and we have the same material or same equipment as the Fab Lab has a third facility at the library. So yes, we are duplicating that, but our program also offers scholarships to get people into the Fab Lab. So we're not necessarily duplicating it. It's about getting the messaging out there to show that we're enhancing these services already available in our community. So knowing what the community says will help you get your marketing message out, as well as knowing what the needs are of your community. And then the last thing is you don't have to know anything about business. You just have to know how to connect your community to the resources. So, thank you. And I think Susan and I have a couple questions for the group. But did we want to do any questions for Susan and I before we ask you all some questions?
This is what I love about going on a Zoom call, because everybody's looking at each other going, should I answer it? Should I ask a question? Should I not? Should I not? One of the things that I think that was really important about what Brandon said is focusing on where you're going and what you're doing, and to hear what people are saying to you. when the career centers came to me and said, we want to do this in another couple of libraries, I was like, no, this is my program. I want to do it. I want to get it done. I want to get it right. I want to have it perfect. And really, that was not the point. So anyway, we are welcome to have your questions though.
I see, I think it's Marianne in the chat asked if we had any pushback from the Fab Lab. Actually, the Fab Lab has been one of our biggest supporters. They are a really unique and interesting component of the community college here in Independence. And we actually use them to figure out what tools and equipment to purchase. And they have helped us, selecting those items and tools and working with us on various other parts of our business center. So that we haven't had any pushback from them because they are extremely innovative. The pushback that we have had is the more traditional economic development entities in our community. But yeah, the Fab Lab's great and has been on board with all that we've been doing.
Sometimes you can get your partners to assist you as well as in your library. For instance, the workforce development people in Topsom, I was asking for a lot of advice, and I got to know the economic development director. And he said to me, oh, well, let me connect you with this one and that one and the other one, because these are people that I would, if I called them up, cold calling them, they wouldn't, necessarily take my call. But because John Shattuck told me to do it, that's, then I was in a good spot. The other piece of it is when people give you ideas, that I found was they'd say, well, why aren't you doing this or that or the other thing? And I would say, if we had the cash to do that, if we were able to get the support in the community, we could do that. And next thing you know, I have people giving me checks to say, okay, I want to support this. Now, they're not big checks, but at least they're supporting the library too. The question here from Ron about the checklist to guide entrepreneurs in learning what they need to pay attention to. We have an online playbook. Megan, maybe you can tell them a little bit about that, because it was the thing that we all worked on together. And Stacy, who's here, was also there, and Atlas and a couple of the other people that are on this call were helping us to put some information together to make it easy for all size libraries.
I had a question for Brandon. When you get, or anybody, when you get that pushback from economic development, because they are very territorial, you're there as a partner, you're there to support each other and stuff like that. You know that in your heart. What are the messages that other people have used to get into you have to listen to, why are you against us? We're here to support you. You think we would be able to, what is the messaging, or how should we reframe our approach to them so that they will be more receptive to us?
I don't know if this is the exact correct answer. I know oftentimes what's easy to say is just charge on ahead, but oftentimes people don't want you to be involved, not because they're afraid or just don't think you're good about it. They're afraid of losing something. And so if you can speak to their loss and speak to saying, we understand that you are the leader of our community's economic development team. We're trying to help further the community and talk about, how they're not losing anything by you being involved, but they might fear that they're going to be losing something. So speaking to finding out what makes them tick and what makes them afraid of what they're going to be losing by having you involved, can help determine.
The other thing too, Brandon, is I think talking about the audiences, there are different audiences that come through your library's doors than would go to an event, say, run by workforce development. One of the big takeaways that the career centers got from us was that they were able to expose themselves to other people who they would never get in contact with, because they were coming through the unemployment or the job, the state job fairs and that kind of thing, and finding a brand new audience, which really is what the library brings to people, is, you know, people who are interested in doing it themselves, figuring it out, you know, that kind of thing. So that helped, I think. Stacy?
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to something Brandon said about how daunting some of those larger economic development groups can be. And I think that that's a conversation I've had with a potential partner, is just, you know, we know that's not the intent, but we serve people in our rural locations that are, you know, if we're lucky, 5 steps away from being able to have a conversation with the entity, but more likely 25 steps away. And
Right.
so kind of we framed it as let us help these individuals get into a better space so that when they're ready to come and talk to you, it's not wasting anybody's time either, that they've got those things. And what we discovered was, then suddenly this entity realized, oh, these people that come to us unprepared, we can refer them to the library for some of this training and support, and that it'll be less frustrating for everybody.
Thank you, Stacy. In the chat, I think Nathaniel talked about Beanstack and how if you don't have Beanstack, you could also use Google Forms and create a quiz in Google Forms. It's a little clunky, but there's a ton of ways that you can use already established or already items that your library works with and readapt them to.
Yeah.
Adapt to.
I might sign up for your Beanstack program and see if I can get into that, just because I think that's really fascinating. Our library's gone really big into Beanstack for youth, and it's been something we've done for quite a few years now, but I'd never considered using it for adults because it's always been on the youth side. And that's gamifying this is a great way to, you know, increase engagement. So, you know, I think that's really awesome and exciting. And, you know, I'll probably like send you a note or a message or something at some point to ask more about it.
Feel free, yeah. I'll put my email in the chat here. And there's also a lot of really good information in the playbook about using Beanstack.
I think one of the things we were hoping to hear is from you. What kinds of things are you guys doing in your libraries, or what prompted you to jump into this event? It looks like Barry's got his hand up.
Yeah, I actually work for the state library now, but I was at a public library for 24 years, and I was just going to echo Brandon's success with Beanstack. We did actually a small business challenge in Beanstack. You know, they had a series of things they needed to do, and then they got a flash drive to save all their work on for going through it. But that gamification piece for adults actually is as attractive, I think, as it is for teens or younger readers. So I would certainly encourage you to think about using Beanstack, maybe not just for small business, but there's lots of other ways you can create challenges if you have access to Beanstack that focus on the adult audience, I guess. I guess one thing I was going to ask though is what kind of support would you all look for from your state library agencies? You know, so as my role at the state library as adult services consultant is to support libraries. You know, our public libraries, we have 94 in Virginia, ranging from very big, you know, ones outside of DC or down in the Southeast, to very tiny one person libraries out in the western part of the state. So, you know, what kind of support would have been valuable or would be valuable to you from your state library agencies?
Maine is sort of a similar situation, and I think having just a consultant model or someone who will convene a bunch of people together to kick around the ideas and to maybe, you know, offer support. You know, say one of the things, you know, that we did a lot was check in with Brandon and see how he was doing with the Beanstack thing. And, and he would share what was difficult, what was not working, what was working, how it was going. And I think that's one of the things that's hard about a rural library system is you feel like you're too busy to do something outside of your office. If the state library could say, hey, there's value in your coming together with other people, and we can give you some training or support, or, I think that makes a big difference.
Even having a list of state people or entities that people could contact, and making that available to your libraries would be very helpful. Because when we started our process, we didn't realize that our Montgomery County Action Council was actually an arm of our Small Business Administration office that was an hour and a half away. So when we're reaching out to our Small Business Administration office, they're like, well, we already work within your community. And we didn't know that. And we're embedded in our community. So having a list of connections would be very helpful as well.
No, we've been working actually just on that, getting that list of all the small business development centers and working directly with them to connect them with their public libraries. So I'm glad to know that that's a useful thing.
Yeah. And I think Jennifer's comment about library leadership paying attention to state library more than to their frontline librarians is also very true. Having the imprimatur of the state, is willing to, support and give you this kind of help, that says a lot to your local leaders as well.
So I don't know if I froze or if you all froze.
Nope,
okay.
We're good.
So if money wasn't an option, what would your ideal program look like for all of you at your library? Would you have databases, programs, speakers?
That's pretty exciting to think about. I would like to have as many Wi-Fi hotspots as I could possibly muster, because we're in a weird spot, right? Like we have a metropolitan area, it's like 360 some thousand people. And then in our county system, we have 3 outlying rural branches that serve 1,500 people towns. And so once you get out of the city, our Wi-Fi, broadband, internet's just garbage. And we could really find a way to sustain that engagement and give them access to our resources better if we could help them with the connectivity. I'm not saying we need to replace internet providers, but there's a way that we could bridge a gap for people who need to reach those services. And that's something I'm starting to do. We've got this grant program that we're working with from the SBA. We're lucky in that we have a local nonprofit entrepreneurship incubator. That's our real thing. Like that's what they do. So they managed to get $1 million grant, and they have all of these connecting agencies like hubs and spokes, right? So the NIC, Northeast Indiana Innovation Center, is their hub. The spoke agencies are meant to connect people to the NIC or to each other. And so for me, the ideal program to increase entrepreneurship would be to find ways to build that readiness level. I think like Stacy was talking about the pre-skills, like how to use the internet, how do you do any of this? And that's where I see like the real gamification thing happening for us in Beanstack is making people ready for that level of entrepreneurship. Like you can easily check off all these things that, hey, now you're ready to go for it. And then we can effectively refer them to an agency that is far more prepared and, appropriate to handle that. We're very lucky to have it. But a major part in that for us is that out in our rural parts of the county, there's just no good way to get there. And I also run into the issue, and I don't know if some of you guys have this too, is that a lot of our rural folks, they commute in town because they're so close to a major metro area. And so that's a challenge for us. The small towns are kind of dying, and I don't know how we can help with that in the sense that it's all commuter, because we're not like, we're not the place. You look at you guys on the map, there's nowhere within a couple hours, but here where I'm at, it's like 20 minutes to Fort Wayne. So yeah, trying to increase that connectivity to encourage people to have a reason to stay in their town and help it grow. I think that would be really an ideal for us too.
Can you think of partners in your communities that you would want to work with, but you're not sure how to get to? Because I think that's something that's hard for a lot of people, and particularly in small places, that you don't want to bother the local guidance counselor's office, or whatever it is, the or you feel like that you shouldn't reach out maybe to because there's a lot of churches around here. There's a lot of churches and people who and you try to keep that church and state kind of thing going, but they are frequently places where people are coming for all kinds of help. Getting on the roster there might be a useful thing.
Susan, speaking of churches, one thing we tried to do at the Independence Public Library, and prior to the pandemic, we had good success with, we would send out mailers each month to our church, all of our churches. We're a town of just over 8,000 now, but we have over 44 churches in our community. We're a very, very religious community, but we send out monthly newsletters to our church with our list of programs and ask them to please share. And that worked really well before the pandemic. But then when all churches mostly went virtual during the pandemic, that word of mouth then dropped off again. But churches are a great partnership, because they have that heartbeat of the community. They know their constituents very well. So don't count them out.
Yeah. I think we're finding here that so many people who just really don't know where to go next, or are just feeling a little lost, walk into the public library and say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I'm looking for. And having that list of things and people and places, and to say, just yeah, we hear you, we're here for you, we have some things that we can help you with, but we can sure connect you with a lot of people who can't. I think one of the things that I had to get over was the idea that I had to know everything. I don't have to know everything. I just have to know where to find it and where to go to get it. So I think that was helpful. Do you have any other questions or thoughts for us? Jennifer says, what about a word of mouth with non-English speaking communities? One of the interesting things that one of our cohort members in Los Angeles that we were talking about before, that she had all sorts of stuff translated into Spanish, because those were the people that they were reaching out to. Again, that whole word of mouth, getting one person to in a community that you can look for is helpful.
How do you bounce between the exploitation of somebody who wants to volunteer to translate, they come in and they want to volunteer, but you should be paying them. I mean, when you have volunteers who come in and who do a great job, do you recognize them with awards if you don't have the money? There's other ways of rewarding those volunteers, and especially those non-English speakers who will come in with, to help communities. I mean, it's just, I think that's a really untapped. And then also there's also those communities that don't always trust institutions, like those people who have been economically disadvantaged. And it's like, you could start a business. You don't have to check a box when you're the boss.
Yeah.
And in the chat, Carly mentioned working with organizations that help immigrant populations or non-English speaking populations. If you can partner with different organizations, that's a great way to get things translated as well.
The other question that's in the chat from Tien Tran is, do you see job seeking help and entrepreneurship as two sides of the same coin, or are they really distinct areas of work? And also, did you find SBA resources helpful? From my perspective, yes, I did find some of the small businesses resources helpful. And I think that what I was seeing was a lot of people coming in during the pandemic saying, I was laid off my job, but I don't think I want to go back to a job. I want to start something on my own. So in a way, I think they're more connected than they even used to be, the idea of entrepreneurship and career help. Some people don't know what it is that they want, and the only way to explore it is through that career, working.
We don't do a lot of job help at our library. We refer people to our Kansas Works program, which is down the street. But I think they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If you're going to have a job center or a business lab, you can have a job. You can throw on career readiness sites and things like the resources as well. And with the SBA resources, I used a lot of those resources in building out the Beanstack program. Why reinvent the wheel when it's already been invented for you? So utilizing those free resources and pulling those in has helped me take a lot off my plate. And it's so much easier to connect a link than to, recreate something.
Yeah.
Let's see, Stacy, do you ever help new businesses by holding events at those businesses, like trivia at a new brewery?
I would do it. If somebody asked me, I would do it. I'll do almost anything if you ask me. And also just to be seen in the community. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
go for it.
One of the libraries in our cohort, I think it was Baltimore County, did a small business Saturday pop-up event with their entrepreneurs. So
Yes.
everybody, I believe, and is anybody on Baltimore County? Do they want to jump in and talk about that real quick?
Carly, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name's Carly Feinberg from Baltimore County Public Library. We hold a pop-up shop. Everyone can hear me, right? Before I keep talking. Okay. We hold a pop-up shop. We used to do it just on Small Business Saturday, which is the Saturday after Thanksgiving. And essentially 5 of our branches open their meeting rooms, and we provide a table and chair, and individuals can register and be able to sell their products at the branch. So it turns the meeting room into a little vendor, market for 3 hours on a particular day. And we've held 2 so far on Small Business Saturday. And the last one this past year was such a success that customers and the vendors actually requested that we hold a second one. So actually April 30th, we're going to do our first spring pop-up shop, which we're really excited about. And a lot of the vendors we see are the creator type, so individuals that make jewelry, body products like lotion and, candles, things like that. So it's really great way for them to get exposure in the community and to engage them with the library. And this time we opened our registration on March 1st, and it actually filled up within 2 days at all 5 branches. So if you can get the word out there, people really love those kind of community events. Thanks for letting me share that.
Thank you for sharing. Let's see, we've got just a few more minutes. Someone asked if there was a chance to see the Beanstack course. Megan, can I go ahead and share my screen real quick? So this is our Beanstack course. There's an overview. And then we have our badges here. So like the development phase, you have your activity. They create, we used a Google Doc and created a worksheet. When they fill out their design thinking worksheet, they get a code emailed to them. They put in their code here that will check mark that activity. They go through it at the very end. They'll meet with the library staff and we'll discuss different portions of this phase, and they can go on to the next phase. And this is our Cultivate Indie small business plan. This talks about how, like, the formation phase is how to form your business, how to submit your articles of incorporation, get a federal tax ID, that kind of stuff. So they're broken up into various badges or sections.
Yeah, Brandon gets the award for doing the most work on creating a platform for us, I think.
Awesome. Well, if there's no other questions, unless I'm missing them, do you have anything else, Susan?
Wait a minute,
No,
Barry,
just-
Barry, what's the Ice House program?
Brandon, I think, did you mention Ice House? I thought I heard you mention that.
Yes, so Ice
We-
House.
yeah.
Did you want to talk about it, Barry?
We
What?
know about Ice House through EBSCO's Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative tool that we actually used ARPA funds to subscribe to statewide. So it's a self-directed entrepreneurial learning package that was arose out of this Ice House project, I guess, which was the founder of the Entrepreneurial Learning Initiative sort of developed the Ice House project.
It's telling people how to, basically pick themselves up by their bootstraps and take an idea and run with it, and how to grow it. And, it uses a lot of really good case studies as well. All right, I think that's all I have. Thank you all for spending the afternoon with us.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
It's been
Learned a
wonderful.
lot today. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. I dropped a link to a 1-minute exit ticket in the chat. Please take a minute to fill that out. That just gives us some feedback on what you found helpful about the session, what you'd like to see in future sessions. We hope for this to be a monthly series going forward to connect and get together to chat about small business and entrepreneurship programs. So thanks everyone for coming. And yeah, anything else, Susan or Brandon, as people are signing off?
Thank you all.
Just, if you need something, give us a shout, email us, get on the chat. We always are around.
And we're both on Slack. So if you join
Yep.
the community on Slack, you can reach out to us.
Slack, you can come on. Yep. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Marika.
Thank you, Brandon and Susan, for leading us today.
Yeah, it was fun. There are 10 new messages. Oh my gosh.